Welcome. We're on camera now, so I think we'll start. I just asked if the webcast was on and the camera nodded in the back. It's computerized, so besides being slightly creeped out, I do have the signal now that we are to begin. Welcome. I know that we will have a few more people wandering in, but as I always bore people with at my meetings, that I am rather committed to being timely on starting meetings. I feel like it's like a little social contract. I invited you, you came, I do feed you, and then we do try to end on time as well. And then we're pushed by technology because we do webcast most of our meetings now. And yeah, I'd like to welcome you to the Woodrow Wilson Center. A few new folks here should let you know if you are indeed new. I think some of the Greenpeace folks haven't wandered by here too often. The Wilson Center was created in 1968 by Congress as a memorial to our 28th president, and we're a meeting place, I like to say, a forum on foreign policy issues. The China Environment Forum is, I always like to think, unique at the Wilson Center in that we focus on one country and one issue writ large, China's energy and environmental problems. One very strong theme that I've had over the years since I've been here 8 years, can you believe it? Is that we focus a lot on non-governmental organizations, NGOs, both international and domestic. And what's cool about today is that one question I had for our Greenpeace China
person
was
like international and domestic.
Yes, because I never knew where to put them on my inventory. Domestic, international.
We like to confuse people. That's our job.
Yes, it's working.
So it has worked. So I've been confused for 8 years because they've been in China for 10. But to take a step back, what I wanted to say in my intro is that because the China Environment Forum, we've hosted many Chinese and international, never a hybrid, NGO at our meetings, and they write for our publications. So we've really been watching these kind of trends. I mean, those of you that watch China in this sector know that, in 1985, WWF and International Crane Foundation were the first international green groups to go in, and they were playing it safe. They were doing, which is good. I mean, they were looking at biodiversity issues, environmental education, and that was necessary because the Chinese government was probably more than a little bit confused about these kinds of entities coming in. But in 1990, we started seeing a much bigger wave of international groups coming in. The realization that China was the 900-pound gorilla in terms of climate change and other major global environmental trends, that, but particularly energy has been a big driver of groups going into China. And you see a lot of them working with the Chinese government, and increasingly Chinese government at the lower level. And what I've loved is that I've seen international NGOs become the glue that's helped to bring Chinese NGOs and government and communities together in various projects. And those of you that have been hanging out with me for years have seen this happen. Greenpeace goes into China, and we're going to learn about them today, and 10 years ago. And it's been a little bit different from how you operate in other countries, but then again not. I mean, they are doing campaigns, but a little different. But I think that I would not say this is a, you're not a wussy group. You are there to make change, working within, the Chinese political system as it is. But I think that I'm very impressed with the things I've heard over the years. And I'm going to stop talking because I want Szeping, who you've got his bio, it's posted on the website as well, who's opened up the office in China 10 years ago.
Well, actually, yeah, our office started in the mainland in year 2002, like officially, and I was the one who opened that up. So
it's kind of, but it was unofficial before. Anyway, not to put you on the hot seat, but so everyone would like to welcome Szeping, and we're off.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming. Thanks, Jennifer, for bringing us over. We've been emailing each other, watching each other's work for a few years.
We met once, didn't we meet? We met once in Beijing for
Beijing,
coffee.
Yeah. And it's really our honor to share our experience with you today. Unfortunately, Jamie should be with us today, but she has an important mission. She actually should be on the train now, going to New York to meet with the Secretary General on energy issues about China. And because of next Monday, there will be an important meeting in the UN happening on climate. We also will be speaking on that platform. And that's why we are here in the US in the first place. But we take that opportunity and want to meet with academics, intellectuals, and fellow
Policy wonks.
policy friends who are observing. Before I start, I want to ask how many of you are familiar with the China environmental? I should assume that people are already quite familiar with the
I
situation.
think a lot of the people in this room are familiar with some of the problems, so there's no need to dumb it down.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, so I
Read
just,
Elizabeth economy.
Yes.
all right. So I prepared a little bit. Although I will not go to the details of environmental challenges, but I want to put a Greenpeace perspective of how we see it. And then I talk I have a few slides on the recent development of environmental situation and environmental NGOs in China. And lastly, on our reflection. Well, these are the basics. You all know this. I don't have to.
Well, no, you can. You said your take on it, right?
Well, basically, we believe that these are the fundamentals. This will not change for the next decade or so. That China's economic growth will continue. That China's environmental degradation will be worsening in an increasing rate. And also, China's global environmental impact will also increase drastically in the next decade or so. These are the facts that you already know. You don't need me to tell you. But it's very important to bear in mind that while the US is saying that, well, if China is not doing anything to cut emission, why should we? Look at per capita emission. Of course, we have huge problem. Just a few figures. According to Szeping, 90% of the urban underground water in China are contaminated. Half of the lakes, 1/3 of the rivers, the water quality are not drinkable. So, with this huge problem upcoming, how is the government seeing it? I think that is quite symbolic of how they see it. Pan Yue is one of the most vocal senior officials in the Chinese central government. He's the Deputy Minister of Environment. He said, degradation of public health as a result of pollution will lead to strong social discontent. Social protests driven by pollution increased by 29% per year in average. Right now, our country enters into a period of frequent environmental incidences. Basically, what he is saying is, if our government cannot stop this trend, we'll be throwing out of seats. So he is seeing the environmental pollutions in China as a governance issue, basically. And I like this. Premier Wen Jiabao, he said in year 2005, let our people have fresh air, clean water, and safe food. Unfortunately, I would wish this is coming from Greenpeace. This is, I think, by far the most radical critique of China's economic development of the last 3 decades. Basically, what he is saying in between the lines is, after all these years, after all the economic miracles, what's the point? We basically lost the basic condition for survival that the government should be providing for the people or securing it for the people. And by him saying that, he's basically saying, okay, let's be a little bit more humble. You know, instead of all this growth and GDP and blah, blah, let's do the basics. Let's go back to the basics. Then that's a very strong critique. And we see in the last few, let's say last 18 months, the government or the government discourse is becoming more and more pro-environment. You hear human-centered development, you hear scientific development, you hear harmonious societies, all these new buzzwords in China. And then you also see, even in villages, you see people start to put up the socialist slogan type of wordings, harmonious society. But I think Greenpeace, from a Greenpeace point of view, we really see that this is actually coming out from a pragmatic governance needs. Not because these top leaders are environmentalists. Maybe they are, but that does not matter as far as our analysis goes. Already, there is a governance needs. They have to be more environmental friendly or more pro-environment because they need to keep the momentum for economic growth. They need to maintain and enhance their legitimacy. If you're familiar with the developmental economics debates in East Asia, a lot of people have been pointing out that the success of the 4 Eastern little dragons, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore, are developmentalist states. Their only legitimacy is based on the ability of the government in bringing about continuous development. And I think that is quite the situation right now in China, with all the ideological baggage weakening. That's the only source of the legitimacy. And also, from what Pan Yue just said, they have a real need of ensuring social stability. We hear lots and lots of local protests, people just doing it because they have no other ways of securing their basic livelihood. Also, from the central government point of view, they have a special need for balancing what they call the specialized interest group, is the marriage of corporate and local public power. On the other hand, they also need to reduce international pressure. I think what the government said on June 4th this year, the National Climate Change Plan, is a beautiful move. They were so smart in translating international pressure and then putting back to say, you specialized interest groups, including the Big Five, the Big Five, previously former state-owned energy enterprises. You have to reduce your emission. You have to improve your energy intensity. That's beautiful. I mean, they're at the same time using, how do you call it, one stone for two birds. Yeah. And then they articulate very nicely. Wen Jiabao said that we have 3 historical changes that we need to make right now as the government. We need to put environmental protection and economic growth as equally important to each other. Previously, environment always comes second to development. Secondly, we need to put environmental protection and economic growth as synchronized. Well, basically, they are saying we should not repeat the Western development model of first develop and then we clean up the mess. So we have to develop while we protect the environment. And then we as a government need to solve environmental problems through comprehensive applications of legal, economic, technical, and executive means. Because by far, mostly they're using what the tools SEPA, say Environmental Protection Administration, has are mostly executive orders. And they don't really have strong legal or legislative strength. So that's the state. And now we go to the social. This is from a famous sociologist in Tsinghua Daxue, Szeping. He said China basically is having a rupture. You hear 2 Chinas. You have the urban and the rural. You have the coastal and the inland. You have the middle class. All these fantasy of China having all this middle class consumption. All the multinationals going there, opening up their stores. While at the same time, you still have hundreds of millions of people are still living in $1 per day. So we're seeing a rupture development in China, a parallel development of 2 Chinas. And in this process, you also have a increasingly oligarchical formation on the top, where the top leaders, the power elites, the political elites, the economic elites, the cultural elites are coming together, and their interests are increasingly synchronized. While you have a fragmentation below, the different marginalized groups, the farmers, the migrant workers, people who are affected by water pollution, they don't talk to each other, of course, and they don't have common language, and their interests are not being articulated, yet they are the same group of victims of development. And in the last 2 years, we hear a lot from particularly from the social scientists in China, questioning, so after all, whose development is this? Who are benefiting from this development? People who study Latin America will be familiar with this. Where is the trickling down? When will it happen? And people then start to question the legitimacy of the reform. People are questioning what have we done since 1980s? And it's criticism both from the left and from the right. You have the free market economists, the neoliberals pushing, well, that's why we need to have more and deeper free market measures. And then the people from the left are saying that, well, therefore we should ditch the free market reform and go back to a more planned economy. And the top leaders are trying to balance these two sides and say, hey, guys, we have to focus on this. We need to make sure that we deliver what we are expected to deliver. And civil society and NGOs in China are becoming a hot topic in this process. However, in the environmental field, people like Jennifer has studied for a long time. I'm not sure if we can fairly say that we have already an environmental movement in China. I think we have a lot of environmental NGOs in China, and increasingly so. But whether the NGOs are actually working together as a movement is up to debate, and maybe that's something we can debate later. I like this. This is from Qin Hui. It's from Tsinghua University. He's a historian. He actually studied the populist revolutionaries in the Russian Revolution, before the Russian Revolution. And he used this model to explain the special situation in China. Well, forget about the fourth sector first. The first, second, and third sector is typical liberal political theory about how a liberal democratic society will work. You have the state, you have the market, and then you have the public sector. The state is using coercive means for public interest. The market is using private, voluntary means for private interest. And when the first and the second sector dysfunction, then you have the public sector comes in and say, hey, we take up voluntary measures for public interest. What is interesting for Qin Hui to point out is, for China, now we have a dominant fourth sector, which is, in Mandarin we call it 官商勾结. Is the collaboration between corporate power and state public power. Is, in short, corruption. But Qin Hui pointed out very nicely, he was using an example of, well, we have this, pre-modern thing, throughout our history, we always have that. He didn't refer to the current corruption, but I think what he actually mean is that we actually are facing it right now. And I think that's also what the top leaders are referring to as the specialized interested group. Yeah. So from Greenpeace's point of view, what I believe what we are doing, or what we shall be doing from activist advocacy NGOs in China, are to eliminate the fourth sector, to help to modernize the state, to help to modernize the markets, to help to bring forth a healthy tripartite system, if you like, in a liberal democratic framework, a more balancing dynamics between the first and the second and the third sector. So that's how we see what are we doing there, actually. And I'm saying it not because we want to have a peaceful transformation in China, of course. What we are saying, what we understand how what we are doing is echoing to the top leaders' call for arms. They ask people to help to stop the specialized interested group. There are recent trends that are really, really interesting. You might already heard about the popular mobilization in Xiamen. It's a city near Fujian, in Fujian province, near Taiwan province. Just in case. There was a plan to build a chemical plant there, and it has gone through all the EIA, because of course the local government, the local environmental bureau are, let's say, the fourth sector. But then people in early June, I think, forget exactly, it's June. People go out to the street to demonstrate. They use technology, cell phone. They spread message in cell phone and then say, okay, tomorrow we're going there. And there are thousands of people in Xiamen organizing themselves. What is interesting is not that people are taking up action to defend their rights. I think there are many those incidences. What is interesting in this incident is, first, it gets reported in mainland China, and actually quite widely. Secondly, there's no environmental NGO involvement in it.
It was even on, I've heard that it was even live on the web, and if you go to YouTube, if you type shaman protest, you can all go
Shaman
home.
PX.
Or if you just do shaman protest, you find it too, and you can see some of the videos. So but the fact that you could watch it live as it was happening.
Yeah, and then also around the same time, Taihu has the LV explosion. Wuxi city was cut off from water supply for a few days. Millions of people were not having access to water. I was being asked by foreign journalists quite often, what is the level of environmental consciousness in China? I say, well, you would not have a population who will have a higher environmental consciousness when you turn on your tap water and green water coming out, which is as thick as pinks. You would not have a population who can have a higher environmental consciousness than those Chinese people who are affected directly on their face by environmental pollution. It's not,革命不是请客吃饭. It's not, like flowery, I want to use one less plastic bag kind of thing. And what is important on this is, again, it's being widely reported, and it was framed as a failure of the public, of the government, of the local government, and also the central government in responding to these basic life conditions. And after Taihu, there were a few more lakes having the same thing. And we will expect more and more of these in the coming years. So, what does it mean? I think the PX mobilization in Xiamen is a very important watershed event in the history of environmental activism in China, if you like. The absence and silence of NGOs is symbolic. I think it raises questions like, do we have an environmental movement in China? Or can we, maybe if we don't have an environmental movement in China, we still can change the environment for a better future by direct mobilization, spontaneous mobilization of the people. And if these are the questions that are being raised by this event, then one would have to ask, then what's the role of NGOs? What are we doing here? One reason why NGOs, well, including Greenpeace, actually we get contacted by the local people. We didn't involve, because we know very well if we start involved in this, it will be the end of our history. Mm-hmm. But that is a dilemma that environmental NGOs are entirely unprepared to take in China. When you have local mobilization, how do you deal with it? Do you relate to it? Do you involve? Do you help them? Or you stay away and keep silent? If you keep silence, then in this case already in Chinese blogs, there are people already raising questions that NGOs, are they new government organizations? Mm-hmm. Are they, to borrow my friend George Bush, are you with them or with us? Yeah, and this is the questions that people are going to ask us, and I don't think we have an answer. Yeah, I think that, for serious people who are studying the dilemmas of NGOs in China, that is a big issue to deal with, and for us as well. Well, I assume you are quite familiar with the NGOs development in China already. I'm going to skip this. Just to make one comment that I think despite what I just said, I think groups like Ma Jun's group on water pollution and also Wang Sanfa's group on legal aid for victims of pollution are doing great jobs, and I think they already shown what would be the way to go ahead for Chinese NGOs working on the environment. You have to be very pragmatic and professional in what you do, and also you have to do environmental education in a deeper way, let's say, in a more sophisticated way. So Greenpeace in China, I'm going to quickly go through this. Greenpeace, we are non-profit, we're independent, we don't take money from government, we don't take money from government, corporations, and political parties. we have about 40 offices around the world, and we started in China in 1997, and we registered in Hong Kong first, and then we started to working in the mainland, actually only since 2002. We only have 5 years working in the mainland. Already by 2005, we get awarded by Southern Weekend, Nanfang Zhengmo, as one of the most influential NGOs, and also Nanfeng Chuang. Nanfeng Zhengmo also give us a award at that time. I like to quote this one. This is nice, from the Economic Review in January last year. This is a piece which is written by a person who is very anti-Greenpeace, and he's advising actually the multinationals how do they deal with us after our battle on HP and others.
And you'll tell us about that. Okay, good.
Yeah, and basically he says that the dynamics among Greenpeace, local governments, and APP presents a vigorous value conflict. These are taken in as a new form of social movement in China with a very important political implication. Well, what he means by very important political implication are that these guys are destabilizing our governance. But what is interesting is he recognized, actually our opponents recognize very clearly the political implication. If you go back to the 4 sectors charts, what we are actually doing, they know very well. We work on 4 campaigns: toxics, forests, food and agriculture, climate and energy. You can find out more in our website. Jennifer did point out that we are a campaigning organization. We are not an environmental education organization. Environmental education are very important. What we are also doing, we see is important, is we also need to campaign for positive change. So change is what we do. So we basically, we will influence government policy or corporate behavior, sometimes through media or the public, or sometimes we deal with them directly. Like yesterday, Monday, if you check the website, we have a joint press conference with Coca-Cola on their commitment to provide 6,350 climate-friendly and ozone-friendly refrigerators to the Olympic Games, and that's by far the largest fleet of green refrigerators ever placed in an Olympic game, and also in China. So we work with corporations directly. Sometimes we bash them, of course. It's easy and civilized sometimes. We helped the Chinese government on driving the new renewable energy promotion law in 2005. We actually is the only NGO helping in the drafting process. What we did is put in ensuring the feed-in tariff model is being put into the law. And also we helped the Chinese delegation in international negotiations on renewable energy issues, on energy, and also on climate, on Kyoto. Some observer said that maybe it's even easier than the Western countries. I quote this with magazines from the US. If the policy adopted by China over the past years read like an environmental group's wish list, that is due to, in part, easier to pass a major than in the US, largely because the country has a highly centralized government and few entrenched companies trying to secure big profit margins. I'm not quite sure about the reasoning he's giving out, but I think that's another view of seeing why things seems to be easier in China in
environmental authoritarianism when it's convenient.
Yeah. But I think it actually sheds insight. I like to think of our limitations in China. There are certainly limitations, right? We will not be speaking as freely without pressure as we are speaking here compared to Beijing, for example. But I think the trick is to turn limitations into possibilities, to transform, turn it upside down and inside out. I joke about, it's really a joke, but if you have to pass an energy bill here in DC, I don't know how many meetings you will have with different senators and congressmen and panels and whatever. But if you want to pass a good energy law in China, hey, it's easy. You just talk to the officials. If buy you, that's it. End of story. It's a joke in a way, but it also reflects a certain level of reality of how public policy are being made right now in China, and also it for environmentalists, okay, you can wait or you can try to change the political system in China until you get a good public policy process. But on the other hand, it is there already. The problem is how do you use it for your objectives. The problem, however, in China is always about implementation. Taking the same example, we have the renewable energy promotion law in China is very good. It's a Greenpeace model, basically. But in the 实施办法, in the executive regulations, it's entirely in contradiction with the law. And it's just an example of how crazy things could be. And there's a lot of provincial protectionism. There's a lot of fourth sector kind of influence in implementing central government policies in the local level. And I think that is the key to understand why we hear very conflicting message about China. On the one hand, you have the central government very bold statement about the environment. On the other hand, you have local problems, really serious. Sometimes we have the non-action of that government. I just want to use one case to expose that. In year 2004, Greenpeace documented and exposed the illegal deforestation of APP, Asia Pulp and Paper. It's one of the biggest plantation and pulp companies in the world. They are operating illegally in Hainan and Yunnan province. They're logging natural forests to plant eucalyptus for pulp. We exposed them. We documented them. They denied. Local government defend them. But because it's such a big issue, it was on national newspaper headlines for a few weeks. And then we were actually getting the State Forestry Administration to come forth in CCTV and answer questions. And yes, we agree with Greenpeace. We did investigate them. They have problem. We urge the local government to punish them. Now, mind the wording. We, State Forestry Administration, urge the local government. Now, I think there's an interesting dynamics one can play with. Most of the time, you actually have quite friendly central government officials in Beijing, and they want to do their job well, and they're sincere as any environmentalist. But on the other hand, they don't have real power on the local government, and I think that's where NGOs can play a strong role in helping the central government to implement their policy by exposing the contradictions under sunlight. Well, I'm going to skip this. Of course, we're not always in good relationship. We have actually a GE campaigner, a former GE campaigner, Xiaoma is sitting there. He's coming to study here in Washington. He was running the campaign against illegal GE rice in China. Of course, you can imagine what the reaction would be from the Ministry of Agriculture. Basically, they want us to die. But it's important to stop the genetically modified rice experiment and commercialization in China, because that's the last battle environmentalists can hold against the biotech industry's interests. Anyway, until now, we still have no GE rice commercialization. The government is very unhappy with us. In a nutshell, the state is not homogeneous in China. Policy work of Greenpeace does not necessarily need to follow just one route, so we do different things. And there's a lot of space. Yeah, and I think it's important to see that environmental reform is transforming China already into a society with diverse interests. And if there is no such a channel for public interest of those powerless and marginalized groups to articulate the fragmented groups and express their interests and influence the policy, the situation of winner wins everything, 赢者通吃, will come into being. And I think our role, again, I want to emphasize, our role is to eliminate the fourth sector. Thank you.
Okay. I will have my Natalie and Mayu be the microphone women, but I'm going to take, of course, I've always loved this line, the prerogative of the chair. That's the first question. One question I want to ask before, I'd be really interested if you could go into a little bit more detail, for example, on the GE campaign. Mm-hmm. Like you said that in some ways, the Chinese government right now, there is no commercialization. And are you guys responsible for that, or what are you doing? What does it really mean? Because I think that's what people, I'd like to describe. What does it mean when you are doing a campaign in China? I mean, the APP case was interesting because we actually wrote about that in my pub last year, briefly. And there was a guy that did his dissertation on Greenpeace on that case. You remember him? Did you know that? I was on his committee. Anyway, so I got to read all about the details, and what I found, I mean, the renewable energy case was in many ways very much like what a lot of international NGOs do, that basically you're kind of
Positive
partnership with the government, guiding them, giving them information, and again, advice. And that was really, that's a model that's been working a lot. The APP was a little different because you were really going after a local government and an international company. And could you tell a little bit more about that case? Because there was the hotel coming into.
Yeah.
I think that most people don't know that case. And then just say a couple words about the GE campaign, because I think to know I want you guys to know they are different in China in how they're operating, and I think that's kind of important to know. Just if you don't mind giving a.
Okay, sure.
It's not a secret, is it?
No.
Okay.
It's nothing secret.
Someone wrote their dissertation on it, so I think.
About rice. Well, on GE rice, I'm the first GE campaigner in Asia for Greenpeace, actually, in 1999. When I first started, my colleagues would say, I remember the first campaign meeting I went to, all the working groups, like on GE fish, GE cotton, GE rice, GE terminator technology, whatever. I mean, all the working groups I have to go to because China have to do with everything. I was so scared. I said, shit, why do I take up this job? And then at that time, if you try to do a media analysis now, year 1999 and 2000, all the public discussion in China on biotechnology are entirely positive. There's no risk. Not even the word risk appear at all. There's no consumer concern at all. What Greenpeace did, me and Xiaoma and a few more colleagues, did was to introduce a consumer campaign in China and start to exposing double standards of multinationals like Unilever or Kraft. You do not provide GE food in Europe. Why are you doing it in China? Are you thinking that Chinese citizens are less worthwhile than your European consumers? Of course, this is a killer argument, and we know it. So in a few years' time, we have more than 200, close to 200 brands committed to Greenpeace request of committing not to use genetically engineered ingredients in their food products. The only big guy that is still now fighting against us is Nestle. But apart from Nestle, all the big international players and also big Chinese food producers. Coca-Cola.
Just list
Kraft,
a couple to give an idea.
Unilever recently. Xiaoma, what else? Can you give a few names?
These ones like
Nissan, yeah. Glico. Budweiser, yeah.
I think these kind of details are really fascinating. That you guys actually turned it into a debate.
Yeah, and if you look at the media, again, do a media analysis of year 2007. Basically, I think it's half-half. Right? Well, I would say 60% would have skepticism against GE food, 40% pro biotechnology. I think the landslide has completely changed since we started working in China. And until now, no GE commercialization has been approved since we started to campaign in China. I think it's largely because of us, particularly on GE rice. We hear every year that the scientists are coming out and say, okay, this year we're going to approve GE rice, but they've been talking about it, they were not able to do it. And we were so successful, we actually, after the illegal plantation scandal we exposed in year 2005, the Biotech Approval Committee, they actually changed the composition and bring in more biosafety experts and health experts into the panel. Before that, it's mostly biotech scientists. So they're the referee, they are the soccer player, they're also the commentator, and they're also the, the audience, and also the cheering leaders for themselves. So we changed that a little bit.
In English, I like that soccer one. Also, sometimes we would say the fox.
Yeah, soccer.
The fox guarding the chicken house.
Yeah.
But I like the soccer team analogy too. Yeah. Okay, so does that help you guys? I think it's kind of interesting to see that kind of case. And okay, I'd like to open up for questions. I still may ask more. And when you do ask your question, please say your name and affiliation so he knows who he's talking to. Questions right here. And do talk into a mic because we are on webland.
Hi, my name is Derek Vollmer. I'm from the National Academy of Sciences. And I wanted to pick up on one of the last points that you made, that NGOs can help in the implementation of a lot of these central government policies. And I wondered if you could comment first on where you see Greenpeace fitting into that, and also how you think local NGOs could play a role. I noticed in one of the slides that you went through quickly, you did note that there are very few local NGOs, and that's a real challenge. And some of these national campaigns like APP had a big impact, but there are almost 700 cities in China, and the real challenge is implementing policies at that level.
Okay. Wow, that's a big question. Our role, well, I think the APP case, what we tried to do is, okay, China have good logging ban. It's actually one of the best in the world. Well, you always have implementation problem like 推耕还林 and returning farmland into forests is the part of the policy, and in the implementation process there's a lot of corruption in the village level and blah blah. It's not good in that sense, but the policy itself, the policy logic in itself is very good. Yeah, because of the flooding in 1998, we see that mud going to the water, huge problem. That's why they want to stop logging in China. That's good. What we use is to, against APP to say, how come you violate all the laws? We just raised one question. Actually, we didn't attack the local government. We cannot. And we don't have proof that the local government have corruption deals. But what we can ask is, how come this company, having the largest investment project in that province, can violate all the central government laws that they can possibly violate, and still having the local government's blessing? Anyone reading that news will already come to a conclusion by themselves. We don't need to provide the answer. And I think in that sense, what Greenpeace did was try to invite or actually force, in a positive way, the central government to come forward to fight against the local government. Because we don't have the power. They have the power. They have the duty. They have the responsibility. What we do, you can put it like this, is to set up the stage and write the script for different players. And then they go to the stage and they do the play, which we direct.
Or play soccer.
But of course not. I'm not saying that every NGOs have to do that. I'm just saying that this is a particular intervention Greenpeace is capable of doing. I think local NGOs have a lot of room to play in this game as well, particularly in raising alarm bells, for example. Actually, we know about the APP logging case in Yunnan because of local environmentalists. They call us up and ask us to help. In the actually, at first I said, no, this is too, I don't want to get involved. But then they keep convincing us and say, this is really important, why don't you come? So I think there are healthy dynamics we can find.
If I could interject, I think that, looking at Chinese, the local NGOs, is that we are kind of at a watershed moment. I mean, they did have, many of you have come to meetings where they, there was the it was actually called it's an anti-dam campaign, but it was really a pro-transparency campaign on the Nujian. And again, Ma Jun and some others, just like you guys, just like Greenpeace did, is that they just pointed to the law. There's an environmental impact assessment law, and they have to finesse it very carefully. And the Center for Legal Assistance for Pollution Victims, similar issue, but that they simply take victims to the court, and there are laws there. But see where it's tricky, and that what when you mentioned the case about Lake Tai, that there is, he's not an NGO, Wu Lihong. He's kind of a non-governmental individual. He's his guy. He's been working. I didn't even know about him until right before he got arrested. He's been so kind of low key, but he evidently had been harassing industries and local governments around Lake Tai for long time, 8 years or so. And he was really a thorn in their side. And so, he wasn't taking, he would go up to Beijing and make mention, but he was arrested, and it's unclear what he was really charged of, but he's in prison right now. And the irony is, he was arrested, and 6 weeks later, the toxic algae bloom came out, and all of the companies, he was actually in the process of going to Beijing to, again, nag at them about these companies. All those companies got closed down or were penalized or people removed from them, but he's still in prison. There was another chap in Zhejiang, Tang Kai, who was trying to create a group called China Watch to try to monitor what happens in rural protests in pollution issues. And so again, sadly, these two guys show us about. This guy was also went to prison for 18 months. Somehow trumped up charges that he had stolen state secrets. He was a computer repair guy, and he had to, when he fixes people's computers, he has to download the hard drives. And so they said that he did it for government, so he was stealing their secrets. Who knows? Who knows? But I mean, this shows you, though, in some ways, those are models that don't work. I mean, you have these grassroots people who they don't really have. I mean. They don't have the ability to build a stage, but again, and they're not making the news. I mean, they make the news internationally, perhaps, but they're not making the news in China, correct? Wu Liang? No. So I just want to note that that's a challenge for the local groups. We do see some groups like Ma Jun and Wang Sanfa's group, but eventually, these chaps like Wu Lihong and Tang Kai, they have to be able to operate without being arrested.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you, and I think that we have to be very careful about this as well, because, I mean, in the U.S., I think some of the more progressive Democrats or liberal intellectuals has been focusing a lot of their attention on people like symbolized by Wu Lihong and Tang Kai. Like the 1% of the populist of the 1% of the activist population who are brave enough to step outside the red line, and the work that some of the groups are doing are quite important and useful. But on the other hand, we should not also forget the 99% of the activists, people like Wang Sanfa and Ma Jun, and they're really careful, trying not to step outside the red line and maintain a legal, legitimate, and accepted and trusted operation within the system and still making positive change. And I think in a way what we struggle a lot is to try to push the envelope, but not having ourselves bouncing out of the boundary, and that's not easy. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
No. But I mean, that was kind of implied. So I've got Steve. Do you have the mic? How about Steve and Judith? You ask Steve, and then Judy, and then Mark.
I'm Steve Mills. I run the Sierra Club's international programs. I was in Beijing recently, and I met with your energy campaign director, and was really impressed. Two-part question. One, if you could follow through on this breakdown between the central and the provincial government, because this is where I find the most confusing. If you say you set the stage and wrote the script, tell me how it played out here in this APP case, how you helped to make that change and hold those who need to be held accountable, provincial level held accountable. The second question has to do with these two individuals that Jennifer just mentioned who are in jail. It's funny for me to hear Greenpeace talk about working within the system. You guys do phenomenal work. That's working within the system is not where I see you generally. Would you or have you ever spoken out on behalf of those types of individuals, or is that just something you can't do?
We joined the NGO statement in supporting the release of Wu Lihong. Tang Kai is a different story. We didn't get involved just because there's not a lot of NGO networking.
And it was very local. The group, it was just in the process of being formed, so it was really hard to know.
Yeah, I think on the second question is a bit tricky because we know who we are, and if we work too closely with one or two local NGOs, they might get into trouble because of us. So we try to stay away, but not too far away. And it's not easy. Sometimes local NGO will say, well, yeah, of course you can do that, and blah, blah, because you're rich, you're international NGOs. And yeah, it's not easy. A lot of the NGOs do not see it as a fellow Chinese NGOs. That's why, actually, I think Jennifer opened the seminar very nicely. Like, who are we? For me, I think we are at once international and domestic NGOs. Like, all are staff in China, they're local mainland Chinese people. I mean, I'm of the few Hong Kong born staff in Greenpeace China in the mainland, and so our staff is as Chinese as any other environmental NGOs in China. The first question is about working inside the system, right?
And the
APP case, how do we?
How did it? Because I was hinting that before. Tell us a little bit more about the dynamic about what happened. You exposed that APP was deforesting illegally. What was the stage?
Well, basically, we know that SFA knows about the illegal logging activities. They have sent investigation teams before, but they didn't, because the department who are dealing with this, they are too weak within the ministry. They were not able to raise the issue for their top leaders, and also because APP have extremely good relationship with Guanxi, with top leaders and top central government leaders. I'm talking about people in the Politburo. So even the minister, the head of SFA, the deputy ministers, when they know about it, they would rather want to keep silent. And we know that they have already proof. You know, they send out investigation. We know that they are already talking to the Yunnan government. So we come in and say, okay, this is not just about, you know, like you have a closed door deal between you guys. You know, this has to be a public discussion. The public need to be involved, and public opinion, the media, is going to help the central government in enforcing their argument, in ensuring that the local government will enforce what they have to as their duty. And I think, I mean, later on as things evolve, it did happen like this. And it actually, we run the case again in Hainan province. It's exactly the same story. And now Hainan changed the new, the #1 guy in Hainan changed just a few months ago. And now they're starting to cleaning up the wrongdoings of APP in Hainan. And APP now is trying to start their story in Guangxi province. So yeah, it's like a cat and mouse game. We are thinking of whether we should go after them in Guangxi as well.
But one question with the APP case in Yunnan, there was a Zhejiang Hotel Association.
Yeah.
Tell that piece.
Yeah. Well, anyway, in the process, in year 2004, year 2005, early in year 2005, there's a hotel association, which is sort of like a Gongo, a government NGOs, like a trade association of more than 300 hotels in Zhejiang province. They come out and say, well, because Greenpeace exposed this, they feel that they are responsible companies, and so they have a boycott of APP products. We didn't ask them to do it.
I know, that's what.
And I think that actually shows from another dimension, the level of environmental awareness in Chinese people, in Chinese even, you know, bloody capitalists, if you like. Yeah, and they really care about the environment, and they say, okay, we use our power as a trade association to boycott these companies' products, and they are big customer of APP. And APP, of course, is quite pissed. And then APP say, okay, if you are not going to recall this boycott, we're going to sue you. And then we know about this case only after APP threatened to sue them. And then we contacted the hotel association to say, okay, don't worry. We have all these internal documents, which we cannot give to the court, of course, because they're confidential documents. But we can help you to invite the government officials, who then can provide these internal documents to the courts, and you will be quite safe. And then they take up the case and say, okay, let's see you in the courts. And then APP chicken out the night before the court case, because they know we actually brought a SIPA official to where is it, Hangzhou, where the court case is. And APP, once they know that a SIPA official is coming with the official documents showing that they did have illegal activity in the province, they chicken out. But that has a huge PR damage on APP.
But wouldn't it have been great if the case had been able to go forward? Think of the education that could have happened, because I would guess that maybe Greenpeace might have notified a few news media folks. Maybe.
Yeah. Actually, we did a legal seminar, very high profile, I think a month before the case was scheduled, with lawyers, with also some of the more controversial lawyers like Pu Zichang. And we actually asked, in the press conference, I made a statement. I say, why don't you sue us, APP, if you think that we are having a defamation to you? You shouldn't sue them because they were just, you should sue us, sue me. And it was everywhere in the media, and everybody was really, really pissed. And then the journalists go to ask them, why don't you sue Greenpeace?
Okay, Judith, you had a question.
Hi, I'm Judith Shapiro from American University.
Hi.
I think a lot of us are asking a similar sort of question, and I still want to ask the same question.
Maybe I didn't
Which
answer.
has to do,
no.
no.
There are different angles. Because
It's a
you're
special,
so cool, we want to know more.
yeah, it's a special role of Greenpeace in China. And I often think about Chinese NGOs as able to operate because they have different types of protection behind them. For example, we can think of a certain very famous NGO leader whose grandfather was even more famous, so nobody dares to arrest him. Or people who, have won international prizes or gotten huge grants from Ford or UNDP, and that gives them a kind of a protection, so that if something were to happen, then the world would know. But I have to say, I'm so struck by your statement of what your goal is. Because when you say it's to get rid of that fourth sector, there's nothing about the environment in that goal. And boy, is that political. That's incredibly political. So as I sit here and listen to you, I'm telling myself that you have an alliance with the central government. And in some ways, you're behaving as those investigative journalists like Liu Binyan or somebody to go and, yes, bear witness, tell the central government, set up the stage so the central government can do their job. But I don't know if my perception is correct or not.
Yes and no. Yes, because we a lot of the things that we are doing it has a political implication, although it is not intended to be political. And the reason why I use this slide is because I want to show that environmental issues, at least in China, is right now at the forefront of the social and political and economic contradictions. And when the significance, the level of importance that top leaders are giving to environment already show that this is the case, and that's why I think we need to have a clear analytical framework of what the implications of our work is going to be. It's not, maybe I exaggerated a bit by saying that, okay, our role is to eliminate this, but our impact, if we do it right, would be the elimination of this fourth sector. Of course, we are working on the environmental issues. Of course, we're campaigning on environmental changes in all those areas. But I think the point was, you cannot not deal with the actual political, social structure along the way. And we have to be clear about what are these obstacles and what are we talking about when we are aligning ourselves with the central government leaders against local government interests.
If I could just add one more thing that I was thinking is, it is terribly risky what you're doing, because you could be accused of being, sort of heishou, the black hands behind the scenes. And the other thing that was running through my mind as I listened to you speak is that some NGOs might get some protection from being part of an international organization, but Greenpeace overseas is famous for getting arrested, and getting arrested in China is no joke. You can't just get arrested for a day or two and get out the way you can here. So it's just a very fascinating kind of a situation that you're in.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you. I got arrested the first week after I joined Greenpeace in South China for a day. We were doing investigation there. But yeah, I think I entirely agree with you. It's not the same political terrain. And but on the other hand, I think that also goes back to what the previous a friend just asked, that whether we work within the system or outside the system. I would say both, mostly within. But when we work outside the system, we're actually strengthening the system that it should have been. So it's quite weird, the kind of dynamics we are involved in China. I agree with you.
I think we'll do Barry and then we'll do Mark. Okay, so I'd forgotten I had him here. So Barry?
Yes. I have a question about the fourth sector. I'm Barry Spergel.
Yeah, can you hold the mic? Yeah, you have to talk
I'm an
straight.
environmental lawyer. I'm Barry Spergel. I have a question about the fourth sector, which you would like to eliminate or do away with. I was thinking of a counterexample in the case of Japan, because there you have this very strong corporate-state collaboration, and also I guess a pretty substantial degree of what you might call corruption, and yet it's been extremely effective at eliminating air pollution, also at achieving some of the highest rates of energy efficiency of any country in the world. There seems to be a consensus, in the case of Japan, that this is something that the state and the large corporations will work together on. And also in the case of Japan, you have another example where the NGOs, environmental NGOs, are extremely weak, and they really had no effect on the political process. There have been sort of not in my backyard type of NGOs who object to a particular source of pollution in a particular city or something like that, but really no strong national NGOs. And I'm just wondering if maybe some of the reasons for that are because, for example, in the case of energy efficiency, the Japanese realized that they could save a lot of money, both for the country as a whole and also in the case of individual corporations, as a result of becoming more energy efficient. And then also, I wonder in the case of some of their successes with pollution, if it's because they sensed a market opportunity there. The Japanese companies, or like Toyota, or some of the manufacturers of electrical generating equipment and so on, if they were the least polluting or the most efficient, they could capture overseas markets. I don't know if there's some applicability here to China, or what you think.
Well, I think it's very important that corporations work in partnership with the government, but not in eroding or appropriating state power for private interests. What we are referring here for the fourth sector is not big corporations working in partnership with government, but it's using coercive means for private interests. This is what we define as the fourth sector. And it's illegal in China, basically. So, I mean, again, answering to your question, I don't think what we are asking for is a peaceful transformation or color revolution type of thing. We are in strict adherence to central government policy of ensuring that public decision-making process are being done with properly.
I mean, the Communist Party issued a report, and I never knew it was really issued. It was probably NEBU, probably secret stuff, but saying that, there were like 3 top causes of instability in the country, and of course there's lack of economic growth, corruption, and environment. And, the environment is really woven into those. And so I think that, so you're right, that, they are after the corruption issue, and it's a big problem. Natalie, could you hand it to Mark, please?
Mark Moore from the Wilson Center. Yesterday there was a seminar here from the University of Maryland, has a new interdisciplinary group called the Energy Research Center, I think UMERC, great acronym. Anyway, the last presenter talked about nuclear energy, and he made the assertion that many environmental NGOs now are changing their opinion of nuclear energy, so nuclear power. And so I was wondering what's Greenpeace's current position, and particularly as it relates to all those nuclear power plants that are being built.
And that China's got 40-year plan to go in by 2020, which still will only supply about 2% of their energy.
Well, Greenpeace's position on nuclear is quite simple. Yeah, no. Well, a lot of the industry are pushing.
The present or the former director of Greenpeace, I heard him on NPR a couple of weeks ago.
The microphone, Natalie, can you have the microphone? Sorry.
Either the former or somebody who was associated with Greenpeace said
Patrick Moore. Patrick Moore, probably.
Okay, yeah, he said he favors it. So he's not with Greenpeace now. Thank you.
Well, Greenpeace employed through history maybe more than 10 or 20,000 people, and one former staff position does not represent Greenpeace. Greenpeace's position is very clear. We are against nuclear power because it is not safe, it is not economical, it is not competitive, it is not sustainable, particularly in an age of post-September 11. If the state is not involved in subsidizing or facilitating the security as well as the liability and insurance of the nuclear power plants, there's no way in the world that nuclear power will be as competitive as other source of energy. And even if China will build 40, 50 nuclear reactor, it will only be able to provide less than 2 or 3% of electricity in China. And it's not an answer to climate change. It will delay the introduction of new renewable energy solution to China and the world. It's good that the US is still keeping the still you don't have new builds here, and I hope that environmentalist folks in the U.S. as well as in Germany will keep this lead on, because the first new builds in Europe or in North America will send a very wrong signal to the developing countries. So you have to help us.
But actually, that question, I know that he gave me a bunch of publications. Are these publications? Are they available online?
Yeah. You can also find it in our website.
Yeah. So, I mean, just so you guys know that Greenpeace China, besides being out and doing campaigns, they are starting to produce some really great reports on China, like on the Sustainable China Energy Outlook and stuff. I just think I'm an information clearinghouse. I want you all to know there is more information out there.
Yeah, actually, if I can say one word, this is really nice. I encourage you to take a look in the website. It's a scenario of how China can keep its current economic growth, but still helping the world to keep the temperature below 2 degrees by 2050 without nuclear.
Okay. Well, good. After that commercial break, this gentleman here. No, it's good. No, I mean, that's part of what we do here. We want people to know what you guys have. Yes,
Hi, my name is Joshua Wu. I'm from the U.S. Department of Commerce. And part of our dialogue with the Chinese government, I guess one of the hot topics is on innovation and also sustainable energy. Mm-hmm. What do you see foreign government roles as being, as far as, well, I guess you mentioned some on nuclear energy. Actually, I think, well, the U.S. government has actually been lobbying to help some nuclear companies. But anyways, what do you see as, for instance, the U.S. role in working with China for a sustainable development?
Well, the first thing the U.S. government can do is easy. Just ratify the Kyoto Protocol. And stop pretending that you are dealing with climate change by having just talks on the big meeting upcoming. Unless the U.S. has done that, the U.S. is in a very shaky, vulnerable position to say that China, unless China do that, we will not do this. Yeah, I mean, China ratified Kyoto. China have very strong energy intensity target. China has very strong renewable energy target. China have a national climate change plan. It's not enough in Greenpeace's eyes, but perhaps one could argue it's enough to shame the U.S. government. Yeah, so if the U.S. want to help China, clean up your shit first.
Okay, that's a good pull quote.
Well, this is not UN, right?
My name is Jen Salen, and I'm from IRI. And thank you very much for this very fascinating talk. I have two questions. First, what is Greenpeace China's assessment this past summer of the closure of internet sites like China Development Brief and other Chinese language sites? And do you see a tightening of the general climate for, let's say, environmental NGO work between now and, say, the Olympics? And then the second question is more about how you do your campaign work and your programs in China. And you mentioned a seminar for lawyers with people like Pu Zhiqiang, and you talked about campaigning, but I guess, and you also mentioned that you worry sometimes about partnering with local grassroots NGOs for their sake and safety. But do you in your trainings actually work with local NGOs on things like advocacy or coalition building, things like that? And finally, I know too many questions. Do you have a membership base in China? How do people become involved in Greenpeace in China? Thank you.
I answer in reverse order. Membership we don't. Yeah, because we don't want to violate law in China, and it's said that you cannot have members. So okay, we don't have members. On coalition building, yes, we work quite closely with NGOs wherever we can. We actually, on two fronts, we are working with different groups of NGOs on water pollution and also on climate change. We are actually working together with WWF and Oxfam and ActionAid in bringing in local Chinese NGOs to be familiarized with climate politics, and that they should have a position as Chinese NGOs, Chinese civil society, from now on until Bali, and we're actually trying to set up a side event in Bali for Chinese NGOs. We don't know how ready our friends in the local NGO are. We hope that they will be confident enough to articulate a Chinese NGO position by then. We do also do trainings and skill sharings with other NGOs. We seldom do training. We usually do skill sharing. Like, okay, these are our experience. Maybe it's useful for you. Maybe there's some things you can adapt and adopt. But we would also like to hear their experience and see how we can, learn more. So it's more on an equal basis. We don't want to. I mean, not that we don't want to. We are not a big brother, and we don't want people to see us as a big brother. Yeah. So we try to deal with local Chinese NGOs on an equal footing. Well, sometimes people will still put us as a big brother category, but it's not our intention. Sorry, your first question was
about the closing of the China Development Brief website, and just is there really a cooling?
Yeah, certainly. I think if you actually it's not just CDB. It's also Minjian in the south.
For people who don't speak Chinese, Minjian is a magazine called Civil Society. But it's a Chinese base. It's not. I mean, China Development Brief is a bit different. I mean, but they are registered as a. Yeah. I guess they're registered. Yeah, they're both registered as a local and an international group too. Yeah.
I mean, you can just guess how depressed we are when we hear these news. I mean, we've been in the last few years working quite closely, maybe not in public, but at least in our analysis of what is going on, exchanging information, sharing our views. I mean, what I just said is not it's not from myself, it's not from me, it's from the group of environmentalists who have been working in China, including us, including others, together, formulating these perspectives. And I use the analogy. It's like you walk in the park with your friends, and suddenly you have whoops.
Where'd they go?
Where'd they go? And it's not nice to standing alone in the dark. And I think pretty much this is our current situation, and it's very dangerous for us. I know. I mean, I take your point. It's not a nice position to be, but we chose that, and I think we have to bear the cost.
Was Nick deported? What's the latest with?
Well, the last time I talked to him, he was on the train to Siberia, away from China, He's going via Siberia back to the UK.
He bought his own ticket.
Yeah. Well, so I heard. I don't know about the details. Yeah, he left China on August 8th. Symbolic date he chose.
Okay, on some other questions here? Mayu, can you give it to Christina?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Christina Larson. I'm an editor at the Washington Monthly. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your talk. In the examples that you mentioned, wherein you were able to influence the actions of a company, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what the particular mechanisms you were, what particular mechanisms you think actually made the company or enterprise decide to comply with law. Was it publicity? Was it business interest? Was it saving face? And then the other question, which is quite big, and so answer it just sort of whatever sort of pricks your mind. But what changes could you see that could realistically happen in the next 5, 10, 15 years that would make laws more consistently followed, such that you wouldn't be in the position of putting out fires, of always saying, here's examples of non-compliance, that you would have better compliance from the outset, and obviously things that are within the realm of possibility. Thanks.
The second question is really big. I don't know how to answer, and I don't have expertise on that. I think a lot of well, actually, it's bad that the gentleman just left. Actually, a lot of foreign governments are helping capacity building in those regards. Like legal capacity and experiences of how laws work in other countries and how that might be useful for China. I think those are really important initiatives as well. Like Greenpeace is engaged in helping SIPA to learn from some of the laws that are effective, like the Clean Air Act here, and also the anti-tort law in the US. And I think these would be quite useful tools that SIPA can model after. The first question is how exactly we influence the companies. I think the best strategy is to help them, assist the top management to see what we ask them to do is not only consistent with their business interests, but rather advantageous to them if they would take the first move. I think the economic argument has not been played out sufficiently in general in the environmental movement. In general, some of the groups did better than that on that. Like I know FOE in the US. I mean, they have a finance campaign. Michelle has been very experienced in talking finance language to those guys, like bottom lines and materialities. And I think we need to pick up those tools and start engaging with companies on their terms and not just on our terms. It's easy to talk on our terms, but it's not easy to convince them.
I think actually, if I can point out, in some ways, what the second question you just answered is actually, I think, an important piece that should be tossed at that first question, like what could happen in the next 5 years. I mean, besides Greenpeace, and I think Derek's going to add something here too, besides Greenpeace, that I am seeing more also in like the US companies that are going into China are also starting to work more with their partners. I mean, we have some, with Coca-Cola, what they were doing with the green refrigeration, and IKEA saying that they aspire to green their entire supply chain. How they're going to do that? But the fact that I'm starting to notice in the last couple of years more U.S. companies doing this, and ultimately getting at the business angle in China, because we can't change the governance system. So much power has already been decentralized to local governments in China. But adding pressure, changing the corporate culture, I think is an important catalyst that could move things forward. So, I don't know. Does that sound?
Yeah. I entirely agree with you. And maybe apart from the government to government cooperation, I don't like to say aid. Maybe for NGOs in the US, something you could contribute a lot would be to skill share with Chinese environmental NGOs, help them to get the tools to learn from your experience. Having Chinese folks who study in Judith's department or work with Jennifer, I think these are great ideas, and I mean we are basically creating the condition of success for the next generation of environmental activists. Yeah. It's very important. Well, I'm starting to see that more. In fact, it's not formal yet, but it looks like we might actually have for 6 weeks a person from the Center for Legal Assistance for Pollution Victims is going to be placed with me for 6 weeks. So I've got another kind of unpaid intern right now. But also that the idea too is that I will, I'll let everyone know, when and if this happens, but that I would help this person introduce her, it should be a woman, to different NGOs around town, hopefully maybe get other kind of experience, because I ultimately see that, as extremely valuable to take back. Okay, Derek, you had another comment, I think, on
yes,
on the
I would like to add
question.
one comment on your second question, because it's relevant to a project that we just wrapped up at the Academy of Sciences.
Exactly what I was thinking of.
We have a 2.5-year study looking at energy and air quality issues in collaboration with the Chinese Academy of Sciences and Engineering. And what was sort of unique about it was that we also looked at the local challenges, and we did case studies of 2 Chinese cities profiled against 2 U.S. cities. And we really looked at how these national policies were implemented, what it took, and what the role of the national government, of NGOs, and the local capacity to make changes in air quality and also energy use. And one of our major findings and recommendations was that China some way needs to strengthen the national capacity to back the local capacity, because, as Jennifer mentioned, there's been so much decentralization. So now you have local environmental protection bureaus who are monitoring a lot of the environmental problems, but they simply do not have the capacity or that real national backing to make a change. So there's a lot of compromise. You could call it corruption. But so one thing that could happen very quickly is you could either nationalize the EPBs. That's not necessarily likely to happen, but SEPA has opened up regional offices, and if they keep going in that direction, that is something that could make a change. Then it becomes easier to work on some regional pollution issues too, instead of leaving every city to fend for itself.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that you guys need to talk afterwards. You need to see their report and vice versa. Do I have another question? I think we might just be wrapping it up very soon, but okay. And we do need a microphone.
My name is Ziyi Shi. I'm from Georgetown University Public Policy. I have a kind of question, like how you guys try to follow up every program you did, or also like, because I know that the government official changes a lot and changes like every certain years. And do you really follow the issues that you did and try to know that if they still do something, like for example, the illegal logging, do they still do something on the table or not? Because I think it's a very important environmental issue or political issue within Chinese society that people always do something illegally and on the table.
So are you still keeping an eye on APP?
Officially, we have to say yes. Well, whether we have the capacity to do all we want is another question, and that's why if funders who would be interested to fund us.
Not governments, not corporations.
Yeah, but no, just seriously, I think we only can choose the key battles to demonstrate the patterns of the problem and where changes would be needed. The reason why we target APP actually is not because we don't like APP. The reason why we target APP is because we want to highlight the illegality. Actually, we want to highlight the structural conditions that enables illegal logging to happen. And that resonates with our analysis of, in order to solve the environmental problems in China, not only we need environmental education, we need structural changes that would eliminate the conditions for illegal practices such as those. Otherwise, it's useless to lobby for good government laws if you don't have a strong implementation in the local levels. So that's why we started to look at APP, and that's why we started to work on some other projects. Yeah, but you're entirely right in pointing out that, so, well, okay, you have so many works to do, how do you follow them? Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes we were not able to follow up as much as we would like ourselves to be, yeah.
Okay,
you can join us if you want to be part of this initiative.
Yes, you can contribute, obviously. Okay, I think that because he was solo today, we've made this poor man just talk and talk and talk and talk. But I'm really, we met once in a coffee house in Hong Kong. I will buy you beer later. But no, but I really, I remain thrilled that you were able to come today, because I know a lot of people are interested in what you've done, and pat yourself on the back. You're making change, and we're gonna keep an eye on you, even though we don't know if you're international or domestic. Could I ask you guys to plug?